Welcome back, fellow armchair generals. This is Gamer 1745 here with my continuing playthrough of Hearts of Iron 3 with Black Ice 8.6 as we crush Yugoslavia and get ready to go down and kick Greece's butt. Don't blame the AI for... got up to speed just a little bit. For not, Uber holding the German border. But once they saw that Germany's pushing in, they should have given up trying to hold, this border. That's a good thing here that they didn't try to occupy that province, but... So, yeah. Okay. Radios have advanced. That is good, especially that 8 hours reduced by total. Not just that one level, but total reduction. And that's incredibly good. And recon unit combined arms advanced. And we also need to stop that too. We can let that go. We come over here and do that. I think that should meet our needs. You come down here. Let's see the ugly map. See if we can sort of cut off this from retreat down into. Fight through those mountains. Not the best troops for that. Oh, okay. Like I said, some of these armored divisions and mountains aren't the best troops for it, but that's what's here now. We've got some mountain units coming, but I don't know that we're going to wait for them. I sort of want to shift them down to be helpful, maybe we should say, in taking Greece. Oh yes. And if you're taking the flank there, you can move here. Okay, good. We've won there. That's nice. A lot of torpedo boats are patrolling. That's good. Now, I sent these guys down here to pick up Commander Admiral Norwegian. Okay, so whatever. Sorry about that. Germans, I'm mispronouncing. And yes, you can just transport that up to there. Don't know if it was originally in Oslo or... Okay. But I thought out by the coast would be sort of cool. That's where we're going to launch things like submarines and... Oh, wrong thing. Putting these guys out here to help with getting our subs in and out of Lorient. Okay. Didn't give him money for it. Yes, we'll accept that deal. Let's check here. Just, yeah, those 3 units upgrade. These guys here, and we're going to put these guys out patrolling as well. Motor torpedo boats, which are, these are, I'm one of the least expert on naval stuff, so I'm sure many of you already know. The motor torpedo boats were, well, they were mostly new at this time period. But these are the things that you see in, like, the movie, really good John Wayne movie. They were expendable. Highly recommend it. These are, and as well as future President John F. Kennedy was a captain of a boat, motor torpedo boats. Another naval captain that I knew, actually ranked captain, which is pretty high, Captain Muntz, was a like a squadron commander of motor torpedo boats in World War II in the Pacific. These are things that are probably what most nations would consider less than a frigate, but much more than these little motor torpedo boats. These are, you know, they're definitely smaller than a destroyer, but you know, they're sort of specialized. I think they have some sub attack. Yeah, 1.45, because obviously you can put depth charges on just about anything, but here you should see, and I don't know exactly, I may be wrong, but sub attack here on this destroyer here, or this destroyer flotilla, however you want to look at it, is 12. So obviously much better sub killers. That's the way I play, and I know we have people that play other ways, but the way I play is that I'm hoping is, and I know I've said this before, is humanly possible. Whether it's the mod developers or the game developers have tried to simulate reality into the game, and the better they do it, the better. And so I look at this, and so I know what destroyers do, and I know that these guys should have very little destroyer capacity, you know, anti-submarine capacity, and so you need something like that to protect them. Now these guys should also be really, I should have oh, I sent them down here, should move over, and I think I will do so now that I'm talking about it. I guess they're not there. Oh, here they are. We should do one light cruiser added to it, just to, we got a bunch of light cruisers, sort of the big fleet. We'll send them over to Kiel here, so when they get back from their trip, we can attach them to the Emden. The guns on those coastal battleships were, you know, not that good in range. You know, the light or the heavy cruiser type Schornhorst and Gneisenau, much better guns, much better range. That doesn't mean that the guns weren't fairly big on like the Schleswig-Holstein and such, but they just didn't have the range, just were sort of limited. I don't know in detail, but I presume they got, as became more and more apparent that aircraft were a big threat, they got more and more, because you can put some sort of aircraft, anti-aircraft guns, you know, machine guns, if nothing else, on a out-of-date battleship. But you know, like the Schleswig-Holstein was just happened to be at making a port call in Danzig when the Second World War broke out, and fired upon a few Polish positions in the city. And I've seen some film of that. And so if you're in with the range of those guns, those are still pretty big guns. So they use some of those, like in the invasion of the Soviet Union, as following along the coastline, doing fire support and stuff like that. So they still absolutely have a role. And if you can screen them with things like some destroyers and light cruisers, you can keep a lot of air off of them and keep submarines away from them. And unless you're coming against a sort of modern heavy cruiser, battle cruiser, or battleship, meaning if you're just coming after destroyers, cruisers, and that kind of thing, light cruiser type and heavies maybe, these guys can really do some damage to you. So if you can screen them from things, so they're still very useful. I would, if I was any naval, even in the U.S., because the U.S. had some ships like that still around, I would use every single one I had. I could get my hands on. Just got to use them for the right purpose. And then they'll be super effective for the right purpose. Like for the U.S., fire support for island landings, in the Pacific, that kind of thing would be extremely good. And if they came up against a good Japanese battleship and they didn't have other ships there supporting them, other battleships or carriers or something, they maybe just be devastated, toast, whatever you want to call it, because they just don't have the range and the effective firepower to go on against some of the rather good heavy Japanese battleships. But they certainly could add to the fire support of other ships. So you guys move forward, you move forward. Okay, looks like we found everything in Belgrade. Yes, you may have all the energy you want. What are we doing up here? Okay, well, we got here. So, across the river, attack in. Yeah, we've got it. I think you're going to get Copenhagen. It was going across those straits that were particularly a problem. Oh, yep. As I was just about ready to say, very likely to have see Yugoslavia fall now that we got the capital, and there it happened. We won all those battles and we enforced conquer. Okay. Now we lost a few provinces. Okay, you don't need to occupy that anymore. Go this way. That's good. Those are just all upgrade units, which a lot of them I'm using right this very moment. So no thank you. once I'm done with this and thinking about going for a continued Mediterranean, because we're not even out of 1940, folks, if you're paying attention to the date of what we're getting done here so far. Okay, since we have it, we might as well use the leadership. I think some of that's going to disappear because we're going to presume create various puppet states here shortly. Let's shift that to here. There we go. There we go. They'll probably fire soon. We'll attack it. Kill them before they have a chance to break out. U.S. declared unlimited national emergency. Yes, we're losing provinces to Greece. Now, I also want to come here. I should these down here before they start the episode. I should have already been doing just this. Get them up into the air, put some into the Italian air bases. Some fighters for fighter coverage there. Put some down here. And attack this region. We really need it, but might as well. Okay, I guess we don't. That's recent. Intercept around here, see anything that moves. Send some pair here, which mainly to fight a bit further north, but maybe can reach down here. Yeah. There we go. I think that's most of it. The uber amount of supplies. I just want to always be making a bit more than we're using, at least. Unless I've got an emergency situation where I've got to build something. Yeah. What is it? Okay, extra wide tank tracks. That is very useful. Now, I'm not, well, what are people thinking of when they do these things? I don't know. Like the T-34, if you look at it, it had fairly wide tracks for the weight of the tank. You look at the sort of like the Christie tanks, which they were based off of, really don't so much. The Soviets over time, and you also look at some of the earlier BT series and whatever that the Christies really very much are based off of. They're just sort of adequate. The Soviets realized that ground pressure and mud that they're going to be facing in snow, getting the extra wide tracks were significantly important. So that was a big thing. Now the Germans, through experience, came to realize the need for this, particularly in Russia, both for the mud season, but also very much for the snow season, because you can support a fair amount of stuff on snow so long as it's, spread out enough. So what they did, yeah, you can look at the Tiger 1 and Tiger 2, and the Panther, they were getting wider. But even the like Tiger 1 tank tracks, or the Panzer like 3s and 4s, they developed asymmetrical tank treads. And I know not everybody's English is the first language, but symmetrical means the right and left half are equal, if you will. Someone's face is symmetrical as if it's completely imbalanced. Well, asymmetrical means it's not. So instead of a track that can be put on either side, they developed tracks that could only go on one side of the tank, and they were extended out various, like, I don't know, 3 to 8 inches, depending on what model of tank and whatnot, so that you would spread that ground pressure out, and since it's a hard metal, it'd be able to take it. So the Germans developed that and retrofitted to tanks that were already being used in the pre-developed. I don't know how widespread those tanks are, because I've seen photos, and there people have saved examples and a few links to that, and once in a while I get a clear enough image of a tank that I can see, oh yeah, that's a super wide track version on it. The Tiger, I know, actually had a special track that was narrower than normal, and that you actually had to take out because they had interleaved. Germans overcomplicated things, and I know about 10+% of my audience here is German, so I'm speaking to you people. You overcomplicate things. Maybe build it very well, and it works very well, but it's often overcomplicated. That they interleaving the tracks so that does do a situation where the wheels spread the weight out even more. So instead of like 2 or 3 wheels in a row on a bogie, and then have a gap of wheels and then another set of wheels and that kind of thing, like a lot of manufacturers did, they would interleave them so that they overlapped, so that you better spread out the ground pressure. It really does better spread out the ground pressure. What it does also do is make them a lot harder to do maintenance and cleaning and repair and other things. So what's more important, how effectively they go across the ground, or how effectively you repair things? And that can come down to a really big issue. If it takes too many hours to repair things, to maintain things properly, and then you abuse them, that's what happens in warfare. You abuse things. They might stop working. So even though they may, under good conditions where you do maintain them enough, they work better. But if you don't maintain them enough, then they stop working entirely. See, that's the problem with overdoing things. Well, but the Tigers had these interleaving road wheels, but to get them on railways, the standard where, a lot of out in the middle of Russia, it doesn't matter. But if you're moving across bridges or across, through tunnels where the width of the train total width does really matter, because you'll start running into things, they had a special track just for moving the tanks onto and off of the trains, because they take off the outside, because I know this is more than simply the extended track models, because they'd actually have to take off the outside set of road wheels and then put on this much narrower track to then be able to load that onto a tank, drive it up on, onto a flatbed, drive it up on the flatbed, and then take it wherever they needed to go on the flatbed, and then where they're going to unload it, drive it off there, remove the tracks, put on the normal road wheel configuration, the outer set of road wheel, and then re-put on the normal tracks for them. Wonder why after you strategically move things, there's a day, reorganization time here, or here it's set up to number of hours before you can fight again after strategic movement, and why in Hearts of Iron 4 if you do strategic movement you wipe out all the organization. Strategic movement generally they're presuming it's train movement to some degree, and so it's things like that. It's taking the putting the tracks on the tanks, or switching the tracks out on the tanks after moving them, and many other things, but that's sort of what they're presuming is why it's there. But that's just little info about both what extra wide tracks can mean and what some of the developers are thinking. What some of the developers are thinking about for Hearts of Iron, and why things work the way they do, why there's delays. And believe me, and enough of them have been in public, the some of the developers very much, some of them have worked a whole lot on Hearts of Iron 3, some have worked some on Hearts of Iron 4, some of them worked some, but like Dark Renowned, at least it's his forum name on there, who's a developer for Paradox, and worked a bunch on Hearts of Iron 4. Trust me, I know from talking to him and seeing his posts, he knows like lots and lots about Panther tanks and stuff. And so these guys, if they're not necessarily meet yours or somebody's definition of an expert, they are most assuredly quite knowledgeable about the topic. And that doesn't mean they get everything right, and some of this, as you well know if you listen to me, I got issues with what way things happen. And they may have good reason for why they do it, it's game functions better, or players like it better, or whatever, some of it's just those kind of reasons. And you join in the fight. Squishing this, killing this. Okay, you come in here. Oh, you're still technically defending. Let's see, technically you just gotta go for the power. Yep, we lost the province, we won that. And I'll tell you, knowing what I do about some of the developers makes me feel a lot better about Hearts of Iron 4. Yes, like I just said, well, I didn't, shoot, I didn't mean to do that, did I? But knowing that there are people that are interested in it makes me feel better that they're making decisions. Again, maybe not the decisions I would make, but they're doing it from a knowledge base that's pretty good. Okay, we're gonna cheat a little bit. Not that I can't use these up in the north, but because I hope to move further in the south into the Mediterranean. I want those there. No, we want it. You want a blockade runner. Well, we'll give them a promotion. Blockade runners, and hopefully we can get some supporting vessels too. But get you out of combat faster. Now I know the Wilhelm Gustloff and the Robert Ley were, and maybe not, I don't know if in detail exact same class of ship, but very similar. These were the cruise ships. Don't know, well, the Bremen was around for a while before. I think that's fairly early. Maybe the Europa were the Hamburg American lines, I think. Those were older but more traditional passenger liners, to go often transatlantic, but take a bunch of people, go to some place, drop them off, and maybe pick up a different set of people and bring them back, kind of thing. Where as I know I said, a cruise ship gets normally one set of people, makes maybe several stops, and then brings the people back to their original destination. But so those get moved here to the Mediterranean. That's part of the reason why I moved these guys down here first, is just so they don't get bombed, or they don't get bombed without a response. Now, mentioning that, we've got these guys here, and now we have these guys out here bombing some stuff. Let's see, let's go over to here. Okay, convoy raiding. Let's go passive. So if you start getting too beat up, you'll go home. I don't need to, have them fight it out just so that they must engage to the death or anything like that. No, just start getting messed up. Okay, that's too far for some of the model there. Still too far. There we go. Pass it, and we'll send you home so that you can go further out later. Now how far? I just want to send 3 of these guys out because I don't want to sink them all. I don't know how good they are. Can you come down here? No. Can you base out of here? Yeah, rebase to Casablanca. There we go, and hopefully these guys here will help mess with the English Navy somewhat. We've won the Battle of Copenhagen, good. There's one of you there. Probably have to ship you out there. So yes, don't do what I did here. Make sure, I don't know why you can go back and maybe look and see when it went away, but maybe it was the fall of Paris or something like that you needed to, before it fell, you needed to trigger the event to get these to collapse better, reduce their national unity. So you just normally take these two and normally have the units not fight that well, so a bit more historical. There was some fighting, but it was mostly just, in my opinion, occupational situation for the Germans. Not 100% just occupational, but mostly 95% or more. But there was no good reason for the Danes to fight at that point. They just weren't capable of effectively resisting Germany. And slowing them up for a few days, a few hours wasn't going to change the outcome of anything, really. Once Germany started collapsing, they rose up, which definitely means that they tie up a lot of German troops. If Germany wants to hold on to Denmark, they've, gotta come this way. Yeah. So they resisted that there at the end, but okay, we've got Copenhagen, we've got all of your victory points, I do believe, and we just enforced Denmark. Conquer. What version of that? Okay, now this one turned out to be Occupy, which I think is much more. Well, they were almost sort of puppeted in a way, but well, sort of occupied, sort of puppeted. They were sort of a very gentle occupied. These guys, I think they're still fighting there a bit. Give them money for rare materials. Sure, we'll do that. Okay, a lot of things to upgrade. As soon as we get done with the Greece situation, we will upgrade. This gives us more leadership, I presume, from taking Copenhagen. Yeah, let's improve our assault guns. We've got a couple of them. Units of them. No, we're not buying rare materials from there. In Brazil. Okay, so we now have our naval base there. You come down here. I guess we finally bombed those targets out. So let's send these guys in there pretty quick. Where are they? We're there. See, these guys are useful for something. And go in and occupy, get those 4 ICs back. Not that we need the light infantry mountain troop type. No, whatever. Let's go here. Maybe by that time we'll have occupied some of the coast. Or the mountain divisions. But since it's mountainy, let's just try to use them the way they're designed to be used. Because a lot of these guys now, they are retreating back, but they are sort of occupying. Of course, they should try to occupy their forts and their mountains and just sit there and dig in as long and as deep as possible. And hold out. Okay, control. Oh, so we technically had that for a little while. I guess or something up here. Okay, control of Greenland, Iceland. After the German occupation of Denmark in April 1940, British forces swiftly took possession of Iceland and Faroe Islands to counter the possibility. These are the Faroes, I believe. Sea Faroes. Counter the possible threat of a German invasion. Come on. Here we go. And yes, I do sort of plan to invade those someday. Maybe even... These are the, well, that's Scapaflow, so that's sort of... These are the Shetlands or something, I think, aren't they? The Scottish Islands there. In the U.S., well, to some degree or another, the U.S. took possession of Greenland to some degree. You want a quick global warming rant? Or climate change? Because that covers anything. If we start all freezing, if the whole planet comes under ice caps, it's still climate change. And of course, you want to put more carbon up in the air to heat it up or something, maybe. More greenhouse gases to it. Okay. An uncle of mine who's for quite some time been flying back and forth between Europe and claims, and I believe him, that he flies over Greenland, and it's a lot less ice covered than it was 40 years ago, and I think he's right. But also what they're finding is, and I know I've talked about this before, this is going to be quick, is that with the retreat of some of the ice, they're finding human habitation. Oh, no, no, no. Not Eskimo habitation. Eskimos actually, I don't believe, were there then, or if ever at that point before. No, they're finding Viking habitation in areas that were uninhabitable, meaning like permafrost, permacold, perma whatever. And I'm not saying like under a glacier necessarily, but just under something that is, year-round snow or whatever. Well, that's because when the Vikings showed up, it was the Middle Age warm period in the northern hemisphere. So when they showed up, it was green, and they've done more and more research on this, and this has all been in the last about 10 years that they've been able to find and do research, because they find various animal bones, and then from human poo, seeds and other things that in it that they can tell that were like wheat and other crops that had to have been grown locally, but could not have been grown in some of the regions under like today's conditions, or under the recent past, last 100, 200 years conditions, because it was just too cold. And so they had thought that the Vikings that came here had been sort of doing the Eskimo kind of thing, because they do know that they can find like walrus tusk or whatever, walrus tusk ivory carved items in Europe that had to have come from here. Yes, they were doing that, doing some of that hunting stuff, but they were sort of thinking that that's what they were feeding upon. Well, no, I mean, yes, to a degree, I'm sure, but they were also farming and having livestock that basically, as they've come to realize that it basically completely, the Viking presence there 100% died out. Now, we don't know whether it just got so bad that the last one just sort of closed up shop and got on the boat and went back to Europe, or whether they, died out of starvation. The last ones there died out of starvation. But they do very much think that it has to be over a gradual generational period, so it would get worse and worse. So at least some people were, the trading times that people could have gotten on boats to get out, but maybe the last 100 or so, maybe, nobody was coming back to check on them, and they just died out. So it was warmer back when the Vikings were out here during the Middle Ages. This is after the Dark Ages. This is in the Middle Ages, and when the Vikings also came down to this part of the world and down to Nova Scotia and such. I think they came all the way down to, here. In just sort of voyages of discovery, we do know out here and up here they found some, longhouses and such that I don't know exactly where, but out in here that had multi-generational people living here, settlements. They've discovered some, and since they've discovered some, I presume there's others that are undiscovered. So we know it was considerably warmer then, and I don't think the Middle Ages northern hemisphere, because I don't know how the southern hemisphere was doing then, but the northern hemisphere was particularly warm because of man-caused global warming. I truly believe that we are just heading back into a warm period. Whether these periods of warm and cold are shifting ocean currents, shifting ice shelf, because I do believe the southern ice shelf is down in Antarctica is growing. That's why that big thing calved off. Its ice just broke apart. Didn't actually get weaker because it was getting warm. The reason it got weaker is because it was ice unsupported over the water that got heavier and heavier and heavier, thicker above the water, because ice needs about I think about 80% of it below the surface of the water to what you see floating is like 80 or 10% or something of it. And so it just built up on top, and since it was water underneath it, eventually got so heavy that it calves and it just falls off, and it just has to fall off. It can't stay there. The same thing happens with a glacier that goes into a deeper body of water, even when it's growing, because the glaciers, the way they move, they're not necessarily a solid piece of ice. They're ice that's rubbing together, where they come out, and if they hang out over regular water enough, that they'll just simply fall into the water. Now, also, if it warms up, but warming is a bit more of a melting situation than big chunks of ice falling off. So in the Antarctica, the recent one that's within a month or so ago, this mega huge one created a mega huge iceberg. That is normal. That is because it is actually growing. The ice got thicker and thicker and thicker and thicker and thicker, and it got too thick. Too much of it was above the water, and since ice doesn't, well, it does, but really ice doesn't bend so much, so it just broke. And I don't know whether it's floating next to it or floating away. I don't know, but it's I do know the ice sheet in Antarctica is getting bigger. So I don't know if it's a natural north-south flow of global temperatures that shift over, 1,000-year period or something, or whether it's solar flare action, from the sun. Sun puts off more energy for a little while, and the sun's age and time, this is all happening really fast and whatever. But to us, it's slow. So the life of the sun. So it's heats up and cools down. Whether it's that, or whether it's the Earth's orbit gets a little closer or further from the sun, or the tilts a little more towards the north or the southern hemisphere, or something else, I don't know, or a combination of these things. Global trends, and I'm not talking about weather, whether it's cold today or hot today, but I'm talking about global temperatures go up and down over history. And even Al Gore's original movie says, well, for a while, the first 5 or 10 degrees or whatever of warming will actually benefit mankind, will help mankind. And that's what we're sort of in this sort of not shooting up like they thought it was, but it's gotten a bit warmer, and it's not even gotten as sort of warm as he thought it was going to get by this date in his original movie. I know he's put out a new movie that's another load of crap, but so getting a bit warmer actually helps mankind. Yes, maybe in Bangladesh and the Delta there, where there's huge overpopulation down here, whether it's sea level rise at an inch or something, because some of these are really endangered areas, or whether it's a lot more water flow down or whatever, can be in trouble. And there's some very low-lying islands out in parts of the world that can be in trouble. But a little bit more warmth, since most everyone lives in the northern hemisphere, because remember, right down here, this is sort of where the equator is, isn't it? Right, going through here. I know these don't quite line up to each other properly, but as reality, but it's sort of through here is where the equator is. I think that's the parallel there or something, or whatever. Probably off, but I think it's right through here. So most humans live in the northern hemisphere, and a little bit warmer is helping us. Now, yes, they're right. If it does continue to shoot up super a whole lot, it's going to be really bad. But I don't believe that it's man-caused, or any significant element is man-caused, and it is simply the if you will, natural cycles up and down through temperature ranges. That's that. Okay, back to the game. This, like I said, it wasn't going to be long, and that was a short rant for me. And I know I've talked about it before, but just since we were on Greenland and what's going on there. Okay, you guys come in. You go through here. I want you to come in through that way. He's shaping up to be an okay officer there. Getting progress along on many fronts. But it's really more the division that's cool. Commandos and whatnot. Okay, you're down here. Keep moving, keep moving. And yes, I know I'm talking to Americans, to Europeans, to people One of my viewers lives in Sri Lanka, so that is obviously mountainous, and whatever that isn't going to be affected by a little bit of sea level rise. But I'm a historian. I look at history. We did not they did not have mercury base thermometers to get good readings, so we have to look at other evidence. And you can talk about tree rings, yes, but do tree rings denote temperature or how fast and effective trees grew, which could be the right amount of water and not temperature? And I say right amount because it might be not too much or not too little depending on the species of tree. Oh, we've got Australians in there. And so we don't necessarily have good data to know that X tree ring means X temperature, because we have to look at a species type, particular species of tree, look at rainfall, look at soil conditions, look at temperature, but also the amount of sunlight, seasonal situations, and put it together. So I don't know if tree rings ever can be a temperature gauge. Now it can be like I just said, how well they're growing, relative things, but is the primary thing that determines how well they're growing is it temperature? Does a 5-degree warmer on average through the year temperature means that a particular type of tree is going to grow more, or is it or is it more just I don't want to detach you, or is it more that if the winters aren't necessarily too cold, but are they shorter winters but not as cold winter, or maybe they're colder but shorter, or longer but warmer, or something. I don't know, and again, like I say, I don't know, but I do know history, and I know what humans, and I'm just talking now because we're moving forward here in the battle, and I know that clothing changed. I know that human activity changed. Different crops were being grown. So at different places at different times. And since I know these things to be facts, crops that you can't grow outside of a greenhouse in Britain were being grown in the Middle Ages. And I know as the Renaissance was starting, temperatures got colder and clothing got thicker and more, particularly like I know it well in Scotland, because that's where I have no degree in anything in Scottish from any sort of university, but I have done experimental archaeology in Scotland. I have, and a Scottish subject, I've done original source research in Scotland, as well as other stuff I've had access here to in the U.S., all and around before the 18th century and all that, and it's based on that. So I studied Scotland pretty well. And I got an academic semester off to go study Scotland. Again, I didn't get a grade for it, but my university said I'm going to go to Scotland and Britain and do some research, and the professors who knew me, yes, you can go do that, and signed off on for it. But it's no degree, so I can't claim anything that way. But yep, been there, done that, and know the subject reasonably well. Okay, we're going to go to there since it's 39. And Scotland is one of those places that is on the margins. Okay, it's nowhere on the margins like here where everybody's going to die off, but especially before the potato comes, much of the highlands can't grow cereal crops because it's just too wet. Much of it, not everywhere, not 100%, but and this is why you don't have wheat fields even in too much. Again, and I'm sort of thinking, yeah, you got the whiskey and stuff on the West Coast, but I'm thinking where a lot of the studies I did, it varies, but you don't have as much. Oh, and you do have wheat fields. And yes, I'm picturing some that I know, but they're in the sort of the lowlands, lower temperature parts of it, where the great bulk of the terrain is higher, what they call it, the highlands, and where you can grow other things like potatoes that, and in marginal agricultural areas, you do have some brilliantly great agricultural areas surrounded by not good agricultural areas. The not good agricultural areas you can raise things like sheep in, or you can do some potatoes and things like that. But to support the size of the population, it becomes marginal. That's why the potatoes in Scotland, but also in Ireland, were very, very useful and helped support larger populations. And so this is a marginal situation for supporting an agrarian society, and that's some of the stuff that I studied. So, and it's in this sort of divide between, super cold ice, world and relatively warm Central Europe, and so it's right there on it. Global warming, trust me, will help Scotland a lot, especially that 5-degree average thing. And since most of Scotland is, even the coastal areas, sort of shoots up out of the ocean, a 4 or 6 inch sea raise won't, height of the sea won't mean anything substantially to the Scots. Like I say, it might in some of the low-lying regions out in the Maldives or wherever, but it won't in Scotland on any substantial basis. So it would help. But again, I say from all of my evidence, it's not man-caused. And short of triggering volcanoes or dumping a bunch of other real or synthetic ash up into the, stratosphere up here to darken it, to cool it off, because that's why I think some of the stuff may be the Dark Ages and whatever, may be weather patterns triggered by some volcanoes that we know exploded. We can find ash layers around. Short of doing some of that, I don't know that, and I don't know if we want to pollute our atmosphere that much. Short of that, I don't know that we can have any effect over it. Whatever we do. That, again, doesn't mean I don't want clean air and clean water. So you go, oh, hey, it's, massive pollution somewhere. Yeah, Gamer understands that it's massive pollution and some things should be done in certain areas. But that doesn't mean the U.S. should do them. It doesn't mean that the U.S. or Europe or something should spend billions of dollars on questionable things. It's one thing to, when I first started to go to Edinburgh, the city was black. Nowadays, if you look at photos, it's a light tan color. It's because in the 19th century, they did coal fires in everybody's home. Coal fires everywhere. Nowadays, and if they're still, I don't know how much Britain still uses coal to generate electricity, there is a way to burn coal through and scrub it out and filter it out to not have it black anymore. So, I don't need 100, 0 contaminant just because there's forest fires, there's things that happen, but we don't want it real super dirty either. So We've gotten a lot better, and not that we can't continue with technology to improve. I'm all for that. I'm not some nut job as, you like dirty. No, no, just, I want it before we start spending money. I want to make sure, one, that it's effective, and two, the effect is something that it will have an effect. And what is the amount of money we're spending for what level of effect? Those are the kinds of things I want to know before we start spending the money on things. And spending the money could also just simply be enforcing desert unit training. Okay, we'll start that. And I heard somebody not too long ago on the TV, well, people, solar power, it's cheap. They should, people should be investing in solar power. It's cheap power. And the other person who knew on the television says, no, it's expensive. It's because the government gives tax breaks, which means it doesn't collect all the taxes that it should to, say, maintain the roads or maintain Medicare and Medicaid. To you Europeans, that's old people's medicine and poor people's medicine. It's taking money away from that to give it to rich people normally to put solar panels on their homes. So you're giving them tax breaks to do this. So it isn't cheap, and I think 99% of them, or 95% of the people that are putting the solar panels on their homes would not do it if there wasn't the tax breaks, because it's too expensive. They couldn't or wouldn't afford it. There are the ideological people who would do it no matter the cost because they're wealthy enough and they're just, I want to do it. Okay, you're wealthy and you want to do it. Go knock yourself out. I'm happy for you to do that. But for me as a citizen of the country, what's more important? Taking care of poor people. Now, I don't want to be a big super socialist state either, but we need to have I want a limited social safety net. Or is it to do something that you hope helps the environment, but you don't have strong evidence that it does? And it started the solar energy because, one, they thought power was going to get better and more efficient, and two, they originally started pumping it back in the 70s is because of the oil shortages. Now, well, the U.S., we're learning that we have so much oil, we don't know what to do with it anymore, and we could tomorrow cut off all importations of oil, and it just simply getting the drilling back into operation again and pumping, and we could easily meet our needs for a considerable amount of time. Not forever under our current technology, but for a considerable amount of time. So why keep doing oil? I mean, why keep doing solar panel and having the government pay for it? If you're going to say it's going to save the planet, okay, but you better give me the evidence. I've just given you a lot of other evidence that is contradictory, that man can have an effect on it. Again, on a global scale. See, that's another thing here, and I talked about in another episode, sort of mentioning clean air and clean water. I grew up in Los Angeles in the 70s. That's how old I am. They used to have smog here. And smog here, there used to be, before a lot of the regulation, there used to be a lot more industry. As well as, well, there wasn't any more cars than there are now. Trust me about that. There's as many or more cars on the road, but they didn't have catalytic converters to help deal with the smog, so they just pump smog out. Well, locally here, we have out to sea, obviously, there's no mountains, but the prevailing winds come from out there. And we have mountains and behind the sort of coastal plain that traps smoke. It's an inversion layer, meaning heat rises, but there's a colder level of air above it. And even if you go back to the old Indian, or if you want to call them Native Americans, their name for this region was something like Smoke Valley or whatever, because they noticed on their fires or natural forest fires that come through here or whatever, the smoke would come up, and then, because you can go up to the hills and look down on it, would hang in sort of an inversion layer here. So the smog gets trapped here. So yes, we can do things to affect regional. Oh yes, we want transit rights. Great. We can affect regional weathers, like I was talking about, clean air for Scotland, Edinburgh or wherever, but we can affect things regionally, but that isn't global. We're still fighting the Dutch Navy. It's here. Let's see what we're doing with them up there. Motor torpedo boats. Okay, well, cool. And as I said before, we used to have industry here. Well, basically they've driven all of the aircraft manufacturing industry out of California. It used to be in Southern California, especially like during World War II, the major aircraft industry here. They've driven it all out. The last Boeing factory here basically shut down and either moved to, Washington State or Georgia. They still, the facility is still here and open, but all they do is sort of refurbishment work. They no longer build new aircraft. So it's still here, but the had a friend who worked there and who believed that he was going to get his pension, and it was a really good pension. If you know anything about American pensions, they're all collapsing, but he was like 2 years from retirement, and he got informed that they were moving his job to Washington State. And he says, well, I'm moving there, because unions couldn't fire him if he was willing to move. So the plant, the airport Boeing thing here, I don't know, still employs people, but it's only like 10 or 20% of what they use, numbers of employees, because of tax policies, regulation policies, and other things that they've moved to Washington State or wherever, still in the United States, but California put on too many regulations and too many other things here, so they moved somewhere else in the United States to continue to do aircraft production. So it's just hard on the locals here. Used to have a lot of good paying jobs, and now you don't. We need to come over here now. And, if you will, unintended consequences. These people. Okay, well, on all those dreary notes, we're going to end the episode here. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks for liking the videos. Please post questions, comments, suggestions, ideas. Love hearing from you. See you next time for more Hearts of Iron.